Well, it's indeed a pleasure to be here and to launch a PowerPoint that maybe is less exciting, although with Windows it's never easy. Just over lunch, which was very nice, much better than you get in England, I heard a story how one of the Texas PhD students was traveling in Malawi, and the notion of standing in the back of a truck open-sided and stops every kilometer to cram more people in there, and there may be a driver, but you're not quite sure, there may be a navigator, but maybe not, creates a different image than the lorries and juggernauts and the kind of metaphors we've had this morning, in the sense of major data sets pushing through a barrier of sound, if not light, in terms of changing the world. Which doesn't have much to do with the talk, but I want to contrast a data-driven transparency approach, which we have seen this morning, and I'm a huge fan of, with what I'm going to report now, which is how do you actually get procedures to manage projects around a climate risk frontier within one organization. And that organization, it's good, the African Development Bank, but it's more like that local bush truck than it is like the supersonic or smartphones that you've seen distributed or displayed this morning. The bank has a climate risk management strategy that has led to an action plan, which has now gone to the board. And what we've been doing as consultants, but partners with the bank, is create a climate safeguard system that has more than one module, but driven fundamentally by fitting within their project cycle. What do they know, what can they do, and how can they improve the management of projects around this issue? Now, we're using data and creating data, but it's a different scale of managing a project process, and they have a very sophisticated system for doing that. Now, the foundation of that, and it's on that first slide in the sense of the knowledge base, is an understanding of climate change in Africa. And we're using an archive developed by Bruce Hewitson and his colleagues in University of Cape Town, which starts with a global agroecological map of the world. You can then select a country. The country will bring up the stations for which they have downscaled climate scenarios. That's one for temperature from Lusaka. The top side, the gray band, is the current range of monthly temperatures in the historical record. The red band is the change in temperature that you would expect over the next 30 to 50 years. And the bottom graph there is just the normalization of those differences. That's a very typical pattern for temperature change, actually everywhere in the world, but all the stations in Africa that we've seen have that clear differentiation between what the temperature climate is now and what it will be sometime soon. Rainfall is a little different story. The gray is still the current climatology. The red is still the downscaled scenarios. The bottom are now the departures from normal, and you see some months look like it could get wetter, and those same months look like it could get drier. And that also is very typical in Africa and many parts of the world, not all. So we're dealing with how do you create an adaptive process within the bank that accounts for uncertainty rather than targets a scenario of climate change. So it's very much embedded in the principle that we need to act because of the uncertainty and not try to over-target a climate adaptation strategy given the uncertainty in the information base. Okay, there we go. The first tool in the series is very simple in the terms of the outcome. It's to assign a project to one of three classes, and I'll go through that. And those classes then determine what additional effort within the bank planning system either as operational safeguards or in project design and appraisal, are required to take account of the climate risks and climate adaptation opportunities. And we use a method just of scorecards. I'll show you a quick example there, but I don't want to dwell on all of the tool tips and technology. So this kicks in at the project design stage. When a project comes into the bank, the proponents will have a concept note, an outline, and it's at that stage that you would assign it to one of three categories. One of the techniques we've used to develop this method is software engineering. It's called use cases, where you create a persona, you give them a context, a decision, what they have to do or the outcome they're looking for, and then run your models and your data sets and your processes through that use case to see if it makes a difference. One of the overwhelming conclusions, and we ran 100 use cases just about every day, we were thinking of new ones, is that the scoring in terms of climate risk isn't dependent on the climate scenarios or the climate impacts. It's about the project and the procedure in the bank, not about this global view of what climate change might mean. It's just too uncertain. And particularly trying to make it quick and simple, something that existing staff can do and do with confidence given their knowledge of the projects and of Africa. So this is an example of the scorecard. There's, in this case, 6 questions down the left. The questions are all, in this case, around agriculture, cropping system, and irrigation. That's one of the sector scorecards of 6 or 8 that we've been developing. Each question, and it's the orange sort of in the middle of the screen there, is the project located in an area where water is sufficient to sustain the project activities. That's the first question. Each question is pre-coded in terms of an answer, and the bank staff would then have to choose one. Each answer then has points attached to it. 0 if it's not an irrigation project, could be a cropping systems project. 20 if it's in an area where irrigation and dry season climatology are going to be scarce resources. You simply add up all of the answers for the questions, and each scorecard for each sector might have 5 or 6 or 8 questions depending on the sector, and then you get a total score. No weighting, no fancy decision algorithms. We looked at a lot of different options, and we picked the easiest one that was simple and transparent for the bank staff. 3 categories. So the scoring has one purpose. It's to say, draw 2 lines. The first line is this a project that should go through even if you don't do anything on climate change? That's category 3. You might have some voluntary action that you build in. That would be the next module. But if you don't, it's still a good project, and you wouldn't want to hold it back from the development pipeline, which in a fast-track sense is not fast at all. Category 1, so you have a score, let's say it's over 60, our usual threshold, is one that you cannot approve unless you've done due diligence on the climate risk. And that's essentially to kick it back to the proponent or to hire a consulting climatologist or ask the water engineers to look at specific things and say, is the climate risk now in terms of current impacts and in the future such that you're really going to have to accommodate the project? You might reject the project outright. You might decide to relocate it. You might have major design alterations. Category 2 is in the middle. Category 2, there would be a remedial plan that you'd want to develop. You can probably lay out the mechanics of that within the bank, but you then have to put it into the project. The next step in the procedures are to look at what that adaptation plan might look like. That starts at the concept note stage or the project preparation stage and has to be completed before the project can go for full appraisal. Again, very simple. We're not trying to do least cost estimates or cost benefit filters or marginal cost of adaptation, some economic technologies that we've seen overplayed in the press, let's say, but offer the bank staff a way to categorize what they think they could do and make simple choices according to very simple criteria. Simple but not simplistic, we like to say. The bank has complete control over the whole system. Now, not everybody in the bank. There'll be a SysOp in the quality assurance division that would be able to create new scorecards, to change scores, to talk for 2 more minutes, thank you, and carry on. Those procedures are different for different categories. Category 3, it's very simple. Just look at the main headlines, put them into the planning document as options for the implementation team to consider. Category 1, the system will help generate terms of reference. Those go out to external bodies to review. They come back and are evaluated, and then you get a more detailed audit incorporated in the project. This is the kind of screen you'll see in the lower left, the major headings. Those are the purposes, so the broad strategies that might be appropriate for the project. First one, manage the climate risk by improved design of key project assets, a classic climate adaptation strategy. On the other hand, the bottom one is local communities, assist them, do some capacity building, not directly tagged as a climate mitigation technique, but something you might carry forward. Those components are then selected, and the purposes, they select a component, then they select an activity, and they're just some simple yes-no filters to say, is this appropriate? Do you have the team that could do it? Is it manageable within your budget, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Only about 5 or 6 filters are necessary. The result is a modification of the results-based logical framework, so an attempt to bring it right down into their planning documents, say this box needs to be changed, these components need to be changed, you need to add indicators for verification. Now, we've been doing that, and the bank launched it a couple of weeks ago with a training session, and we're going to have a side event in the Africa Pavilion in Durban. But reflecting on what I've been learning yesterday and today, and starting to engage in this, how do you account for the adaptation finance? Well, the transparency is really interesting because it's transparent within the bank. And at every stage, we asked ourselves, well, couldn't we put a little decision rule in here? And we said, no, it has to be accessible. There's no black box. There's no magic. You just work through logically, and it's all transparent to the staff. And I think that manages to get over the reluctance to deal with climate change as mystery or advocacy or some sort of quantification that we just don't know about, and just deal with it as a set of procedures. The steps are all documented, so the Quality Assurance Division can go back through what the task managers have done and say, yeah, that's an audit that we would agree with. It's documented. They've made good judgments. Is it right or is it wrong? We don't know. But they've made a due process and are accountable for that process. I think one of the results will be shifting the portfolio of projects toward more climate resilience. And this isn't an environmental impact assessment. This is trying to push adaptation as capacity building, as preparation, as resilience into the project format. And I think that'll be a very strong result. We think there's a way to tag our system or extend it. It wouldn't be difficult, but it would require some more thought, and start to track not only the budget assigned to each component, but also the expenditure as the project gets implemented. Thank you.